Reacher Season 2, Episode 7 goes back to Reacher's past for all of Season 2 so far. Jack Reacher hasn't quite been the character fans saw in the previous outing of the Prime Video series. He's still a mountain of a man drifting through the world and using his immensity, among other skills, to right wrongs. The deaths of his former U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division colleagues affected him more than his brother's murder. He's not his brother's keeper, but he was their commanding officer. The man goes through, brings Reacher full circle, and finally back to full strength. He'll need it. Despite his duty of care to his fallen friends, what really unsettles Reacher is working with the surviving members of the 110th Special Investigators Unit again. In the 2 years since Reacher Season 1, it's safe to assume he's had some off-screen adventures after avenging his brother's death in Margrave. This means he's used to being the smartest and most skilled operator in the room. Working with Francis Neagley, David O'Donnell, and perhaps most of all, Carla Dixon has humbled him. He's no longer their commanding officer, and without the rank on his chest, the dynamic is different. Still, despite Reacher's subtle uncertainty, the team still follows his orders and looks to him for leadership. Episode 7 finishes off the flashback story running throughout Season 2, showing the audience why. A flashback in the previous episode, New York's Finest, showed how U.S. Army officer politics derailed their investigation into the 2-year drug ring on base. In what's the longest flashback sequence in Season 2, Reacher and the 110th Special Investigators disobey orders and launch a full-on assault on the operation anyway. Before this, though, Reacher gives a speech about the consequences they will face, from losing rank to being assigned to mundane, or even worse, dangerous duty assignments. He wants to stop the spread of heroin on base and in the surrounding economy, but it's more than that. And we'll be making sure the criminals hiding behind the name of the U.S. Army can't do so with impunity, he said. No other single line so clearly defines who Reacher is, or at least was, when he was a soldier. He's not necessarily by the book, but he's willing to risk his and his unit's lives to stop some of the domestic enemies his oath of enlistment talked about. Along with being the classic action movie Combat Reacher is known for, this extended digression serves two purposes. First, it shows the audience the 110th Special Investigators going to war with all the deep, lifelong bonding that comes with combat. Second, it serves to show the platonic ideal of who Reacher is. He gives the criminal soldiers a chance to surrender. The two that don't are killed in self-defense by the 110th, while the one who runs is taken into custody. The civilian buyers are dispatched with what some might call extreme prejudice. Reacher's commander interrupts their celebration, the unit singing a song Guardians of the Galaxy Vol 3 fans will recognize. It's the end of the unit and the start of Reacher's life as a drifter. The scene that follows the flashback reinforces the idea that Reacher is back in peak form. It's not that Reacher and Dixon effortlessly sneak into a hospital room guarded by police. Instead, it's what he says to the only survivor of the team that killed Detective Russo that proves it. He grabs him by the throat and threatens him. You yell or make noise, I'll tear your trachea out, and your last thought will be, holy shit, he really did it. Reacher's wit, swagger, and brutality are finally back to Season 1 levels. In Episode 7 of Reacher Season 2, the show dives deep into Jack Reacher's past, unraveling layers of his history that help explain the man he is today. The episode opens with Reacher in the middle of an intense confrontation, one that seems routine for the hulking ex-military police officer. Yet, as he defuses the situation with his signature blend of brute force and tactical precision, something shifts. There's a lingering feeling in the air, something haunting him from the past. And soon, the audience is transported to a time long before Reacher's nomadic life as a drifter and vigilante. The episode's first flashback takes us to Reacher's childhood, back to a military base where his father was stationed. We see a young Reacher, around 12 years old, living in the strict, structured environment of the base. His father, a stoic military man, instills a deep sense of discipline in Jack and his brother Joe. The flashbacks reveal not just the physical training they underwent learning to fight, disarm opponents, and think strategically, but also the emotional distance that was ingrained in them. This is where Reacher's hardened lone wolf persona begins to take shape. In the present, Reacher is drawn to a small, dusty town in the Midwest. His reasons for being there are murky at first, but it soon becomes clear that this isn't just another stop in his wandering life. There's something personal about this visit. He walks the streets with a rare sense of familiarity, passing old landmarks, abandoned storefronts, and a dilapidated house that seems to stir something deep within him. As Reacher enters a local diner, the waitress recognizes him, though it's clear she hasn't seen him in years. The interaction is awkward, filled with tension as she brings up someone from Reacher's past, a woman named Carrie, who seems to have been important to him in ways the audience doesn't yet understand. Reacher, as usual, deflects, burying his emotions beneath his stoic facade, but the audience can see that this place holds more for him than just memories. It's a ghost town filled with the shadows of his past. Another flashback takes us to Reacher's early military days, this time as a young MP officer. It's here that he meets Carrie, a smart and determined investigative journalist who is working on an exposé about military corruption. At first, Reacher is skeptical of her, viewing her as an outsider meddling in military affairs. But as the two are forced to work together on a case involving a high-ranking officer involved in illegal arms trading, a bond forms between them. Carrie is not like anyone Reacher has ever known. She's fierce, independent, and unafraid to challenge his authority. Their relationship is more than just professional, there's a deep, simmering attraction between them. But as the flashbacks unfold, it becomes clear that something went terribly wrong. Carrie got too close to uncovering a dangerous truth, and despite Reacher's efforts to protect her, she was killed under mysterious circumstances. This death has haunted Reacher ever since, driving him further into isolation and fueling his mistrust of both the military and government institutions. In the present, Reacher begins piecing together clues that suggest Carrie's death wasn't as accidental as he was led to believe. He starts digging into the town's recent history and discovers that a shadowy figure from his past, someone he thought was long gone, has reemerged. This person, a former Black Ops agent with deep ties to the military-industrial complex, was involved in the cover-up of Carrie's murder. Reacher's instincts tell him that coming back to this town wasn't just a coincidence. He's been lured here by forces trying to manipulate him into silence. As Reacher delves deeper, the episode builds in tension. He confronts old military contacts, now working in shady civilian roles, and pieces together a conspiracy that stretches back decades, one that involves the same corrupt officers Carrie was investigating. The plot thickens as Reacher realizes that not only was Carrie's death part of a larger cover-up, but that there are still people who want the truth buried. The emotional core of the episode lies in Reacher's internal struggle. For the first time in the series, we see him vulnerable, grappling with guilt over Carrie's death. He's a man used to solving problems with his fists, but this isn't a battle he can fight with sheer force. It's a battle with his own conscience, as he wrestles with whether avenging Carrie's death will give him the closure he's been avoiding all these years. By the episode's climax, Reacher tracks down the man responsible for orchestrating the cover-up. In a brutal, pulse-pounding showdown, Reacher confronts him in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The fight is raw and visceral, but in the end, Reacher emerges victorious, though not without cost. He's forced to confront the ghosts of his past, knowing that while justice for Carrie might finally be served, the emotional scars will remain.